I was good. And you? They were in his office, her first time with him. I never saw it with my own eyes, yet every detail haunts me. I can picture her leaning against the large mahogany desk, the blinds half drawn, a sliver of late afternoon sunlight catching the dust motes in the air. There's a hush like the calm before a storm. She's wearing something slim-fitting, maybe a pencil skirt, something professional, because that day she'd gone to the country club for a meeting about a new yoga partnership. He's tall, wearing one of his crisp polo shirts, and that self-assured, smirking expression. I know the feel of that place, a lingering smell of leather chairs, fresh coffee, faint cologne. I stepped inside that office before, back when I believed we were just colleagues, when I didn't know I was already living a half-truth. Here's the part that stings. She used to say I was the only man who knew how to quiet her anxious mind. That was my personal triumph. But apparently, with him, Daniel Lawson, the club director, the big shot, she found another kind of calm, or excitement, or whatever intangible word she'd choose to justify it. The first time, so she later hinted, was slow at first. Quiet breathing, polite conversation, a teasing hand placed lightly on her wrist. Then a spark, a closeness that escalated to something unstoppable. She said the door was locked. The phone was unplugged. The world outside was muted for those few minutes. It was, as she described in a message I once read, like letting go of a weight I'd been carrying for years. I was good. And you? That question echoes in my head, as if I'm addressing the ghost of who she used to be, or the ghost of who I used to be. Because the man I was, the reliable, gentle husband, he evaporated that day. Or maybe it was a slow death, a dissolution of trust that started long before I found the actual proof. I should probably introduce myself, though not in the usual sense. Let's keep things official and distant, if you don't mind, like we're two strangers in a waiting room. My name is Robert Jensen. Friends call me Rob. I'm 38, but I feel older. People say I have a good job. Marketing manager, stable income, own a home in the suburbs outside Seattle. My wife, yes, I still call her that, though I've come to realize how meaningless that term can become. Her name is Marissa. She's 36, a yoga instructor and a freelance graphic designer. For years, I thought we were a good team. We had our routines, our inside jokes. We shared a mortgage, a bed, a slice of that American dream. Then came the boss, Daniel. Except I never liked calling him that. Boss implied authority, so I'd just say her colleague, or the guy from the country club. It sounded more harmless that way. Our marriage was quiet, sure, comfortable in a way that can either be your safe haven or your silent tomb. Sometimes I'd watch her from the couch after a long day. She'd be on her yoga mat, stretching, eyes half closed, mind somewhere else. I'd wonder, am I truly seeing her, or is she drifting? The weeks before I found out about them, she'd been more withdrawn, polite but distant. When I touched her, I felt this thin layer of ice, a boundary I couldn't cross. I asked if everything was okay. She'd say, "Yes, Robert, I'm fine," always politely. She used to call me Rob in a warm voice. Over time, it was just Robert, or no name at all. But let's not skip ahead. The first real blow came from the old postcard that slipped out of a photo album. To my beast, it said in messy blue ink. I recognized the handwriting. Daniel's. He used to be her personal trainer when we lived in California years back, before he got his sports management degree and stepped into the country club world. I remembered how he'd watch her during sessions, the way you stare at a piece of meat you're determined to cook to perfection. At the time, I brushed it off as my own jealousy. But apparently, those unspoken looks held more weight than I ever guessed. Imagine me standing in our kitchen, flipping through that old photo album, searching for something normal, a picture of us smiling, maybe. Instead, I found that card. To my beast, she never mentioned it, but the date scrawled on the back was from the day they first got in touch again, after he became the director. Like a nod to some inside joke they shared years ago. I felt my heart sink, but I told myself, maybe it's harmless. Maybe it's a relic from the past, an odd leftover. So I let it pass. But then came the night she was up late texting, claiming it was about class schedules. Her phone pinged in the bathroom, and she asked me to pass it to her. A brief notification on the lock screen read, "See you soon, Miss Beast. I'll keep the door open." That was the moment the mirror shattered. The next day, I quietly scheduled a test, for me, for my own sanity. A test to confirm that, physically, we didn't have some bigger issue at stake. I'll be honest. I was terrified she might have exposed me to something. That's how rattled I felt. Everything came back clean, but it didn't fix the real disease, her betrayal. I didn't confront her immediately. The typical thing might have been to demand an explanation, to shout, or slam the door. But I couldn't. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of me. I felt cold, mechanical. I'd see her in the morning, sipping her green smoothie, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't read. I'd ask if she slept well. She'd nod, polite and distant. Then I'd drive to work, replaying that lock screen text in my head, the words swirling like a broken record. It's bizarre how life can continue so normally in the face of a crumbling marriage. Bills still arrive. The dog still needs walking. Yes, we had a German shepherd, Toby, an old boy who'd tilt his head at me as if to say, "What's wrong, bud?" I'd still log into Zoom meetings, plan marketing campaigns, write polite emails. My colleagues never suspected anything. But inside, I was a roiling mess of disbelief, heartbreak, and a strange type of hatred I'd never felt before. And through it all, I was silent. That's the cruelty of a cold betrayal. You want to scream, but your voice stalls in your throat. At night, I'd stare at her sleeping form. She still wore the same lavender lotion that used to drive me crazy. Now that fragrance made me nauseous. The mix of memories and lies was too much. Some nights, I'd slip out to the living room, watch the flickering TV, not really absorbing anything on the screen. My mind was stuck on a reel of them, of his hands, her soft moans, that hush behind a locked office door. Over and over, it played. Eventually, a month passed in that suspended tension. And in that month, I changed. I grew more attentive, ironically. I studied her every move as if I could glean the truth from the tilt of her head or the shift of her voice. But I also grew colder. My eyes, once warm, felt dead when I looked at her. She noticed. She'd sometimes place a cautious hand on my arm, like she wanted to ask something. But she never did. Maybe she was waiting for me to break the silence. Maybe she believed I was too naive to suspect. Either way, we were both locked in a dance, each refusing to fully engage. And then came the night of the 9th episode. We'd been watching some drama series she loved. Something about a powerful CEO, a cheating wife, the usual soap tropes. She was curled on the couch, eyes fixed on the screen. When the wife character climbed into bed with the boss in that 9th episode, I felt my body tense. I saw Marissa's face, a flicker of guilt, or was it longing? I couldn't stomach it. I stood up, walked out. She called after me softly, "Robert," but I didn't respond. I went straight to the kitchen, rummaged in the cabinet for an old box of keepsakes. I'm not sure why. Perhaps I was looking for something to anchor me, some memory of better times. Instead, that postcard from him fell out again. To my beast. The final proof was physically in my hands, mocking me. In the weeks that followed, the tension rose. Sometimes, I'd hear her phone buzzing late. She'd glance at me, hesitate, then pick it up, step into another room. The house felt stifling. Every corner a reminder of what we'd built and how it was rotting from within. I found myself waking at odd hours, panting. Maybe nightmares, maybe panic attacks. Always the same image. Her standing at that boss's desk, hair falling over her shoulder, lips parted in a sigh. and I'd be stuck behind a glass pane, unable to break through. Then I met Laura, my wife's friend, ironically. She was visiting from out of town, apparently too lonely and too smart, as my wife had labeled her. The first time we spoke in depth was at a local coffee shop. We'd both shown up unexpectedly, each escaping our own brand of suffocating environment. She recognized me, offered a polite smile. I invited her to my table. The conversation started stiff. We were acquaintances, nothing more. Yet somehow, we kept talking. She mentioned how she felt overshadowed by Marissa in college, how men always gravitated to my wife's graceful persona, how even in friendships, Marissa had this magnetic effect. Laura said, "It's like she glides through rooms. I watch her and wonder if anyone can really pin her down. Not to be rude, she's my friend, but she's got that intangible layer." I listened, feeling an odd sense of validation. So I wasn't the only one who found Marissa distant, somewhat unreachable. Laura was quiet for a moment before adding, "But how are you, Rob?" "Really?" I hesitated, gave a standard response. She leaned forward, eyes sincere. "You seem, I don't know, off." For a second, I wanted to spill everything. The cheating, the nights I'd spent fighting my own bitterness, the humiliating test results I'd hidden in a file labeled private. But I choked it back. Instead, I said, "I'm good. Sometimes I just feel disconnected." A worthless summary of the avalanche inside me. She nodded, as though she sensed the deeper truth but wouldn't pry. By the time we left that coffee shop, there was a subtle bond. Two lonely people who recognized something mirrored in the other. Days passed. The tension at home soared, though outwardly, we still played the roles of polite spouses. "Morning," I'd say. "Morning," she'd respond. "How was work?" "Fine." "Going to teach yoga?" "Yes." Her phone would vibrate. She'd glance at me, half apologetic, but say nothing. She'd come home late, sometimes smelling of aftershave that wasn't mine. I'd throw in some new question to which she gave a standard reply. Our conversations felt official, each of us an embassy with carefully measured words. It was like living with a polite stranger. And inside, I was cornered by my own thoughts, each day adding a new layer of anger and heartbreak. One night, I was so wound up I couldn't sleep. I walked into the bedroom, found her flipping through some design pages, legs folded under her in that perfect yoga posture. I stood there, searching her expression. If she would have just looked up, maybe we could have found a way to talk. But she kept her eyes on the papers, as if to avoid any honest gaze. "Marissa," I said. My voice sounded foreign to me, flat, emotionless. She answered with a small yes. Without looking up, I wanted to ask if she was still mine, or if she'd already left me in spirit. Instead, I just shook my head and walked out. That's how men like me break. Not in loud fury, but in quiet implosions. It took me weeks to realize I was done. Done with illusions, with unspoken truths. The day of clarity came when I saw Laura again. She had arranged a small gathering at some new bar downtown, invited a few old acquaintances from college. Marissa was too busy to join, so I went alone. People were laughing, telling stories of old times. I just stood there, swirling my drink, feeling out of place. Laura noticed and pulled me aside to a quieter corner near the bar's worn brick wall. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked again, with that genuine concern that I'd rarely seen from anyone recently. I exhaled. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I murmured something about how everything was caving in, how Marissa was distant, how I felt like a ghost in my own house. Laura's eyes watered, not out of pity, but empathy. She placed a hand on mine. "I get it," she said softly. "I've been alone for so long. But you shouldn't have to feel this alone when you have a partner." I didn't expect what happened next. A surge of warmth, comfort, some spark that overshadowed the gloom in my chest. It wasn't sexual at first. It was a simple human closeness that I'd been starving for. By the end of the night, We shared more than just words. It was a kiss. Gentle, hesitant, but real. I pulled back quickly, my mind screaming, "This is betrayal." But a deeper voice said, "She betrayed you first. Doesn't that free you?" That voice was raw, angry, and strangely liberating. I walked Laura to her car. She asked if I wanted a ride home. Without thinking, I said yes. That's how we ended up driving along the highway. The city lights fading in the rear view. Her hair was pulled back. She kept looking at me, searching my expression. Part of me felt guilty. Another part felt alive. After what felt like an hour of silent tension, we parked outside my house. Toby barked inside. The windows were dark. Marissa was likely asleep, or maybe not. I glanced at the front door, then back at Laura. She bit her lip, uncertain. "This might be crossing a line," she said in a hushed tone. I answered with a shaky sigh. "That line's already been crossed by someone else." Her eyes flickered with understanding. We sat there in silence for a moment, both aware that everything was about to change. I stepped out of the car, thanked her, and watched her drive away. I didn't see Marissa that night. She must have been sleeping, or pretending to. I lay in bed, fully clothed, eyes open until dawn. In the morning, I found her standing by the window, arms folded, expression unreadable. She said nothing. I said nothing. The air felt suffocating. We were two actors in a scene where neither had memorized lines. Eventually, I grabbed my keys and left for work. That day, I realized my anger was too big to contain. It was fueling me, but also corroding me. So I started planning my exit. It wasn't about revenge. Not exactly. It was about reclaiming myself. I made arrangements to take an extended leave. My boss at the marketing firm, an understanding guy, nodded sympathetically when I told him I had personal matters to address. He probably assumed it was a family emergency. In a way, he wasn't wrong. A few days later, Laura called. "I've been thinking about getting out of this place for a while. Would you want to come with me? Just for a weekend. I have a friend's cabin near the coast. You need a break, Rob." Her voice was gentle but insistent. I hesitated. I pictured Marissa in the house, maybe training with Daniel, or meeting him in that damn office. Toby waiting at the window, tail wagging. My chest felt tight. I told Laura, "I'll let you know." When I got home that evening, Marissa was in the kitchen, rummaging through drawers as if searching for something she couldn't find. She turned to me, eyes brimming with an emotion I hadn't seen in months. "Fear, or heartbreak." "Robert," she began. That single word carried a weight of confessions. I stared at her. I waited. She parted her lips, then closed them. Finally, she said, "Where were you last night? You came home late." Her tone was neutral, but her eyes shimmered with tears she fought to suppress. My rage nearly exploded. How dare she question me now, after all the silent betrayals? I clenched my fists, took a breath, forced myself to keep calm. "Work," I lied. "And then, anything else you want to know?" She stood there, fists on the counter. You've been so distant. I don't know what's happening." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You don't." My voice was icy. "I've been here, Marissa. Right here in this house. While you, never mind." She took a step toward me, her gaze flickering with guilt. "Robert, if something is bothering you, we should talk. We can't just..." I cut her off with a raised hand. "Talk." The word felt foreign. "Like how you and Daniel talk. In locked offices." Her face went pale. A hush thickened the air. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Everything was spelled out in that silent exchange. Her lips parted again, but whatever she wanted to confess never reached me. I was too furious to care. "I'm heading out," I said quietly. "I need air." She didn't move. She just stared at me, her eyes pleading for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe confrontation. I brushed past her, grabbed my keys, and left her standing there. Toby gave a small whimper. I almost felt sorry for him, caught in the crossfire. The next day, Laura and I drove out to the cabin on the coast. The ride was mostly silent, except for the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I stared at the passing scenery, the gray sky, the silhouette of tall pines. She occasionally glanced at me, as if trying to gauge my mood. I suppose I was trying to gauge it myself. Anger, betrayal, a twisted sense of freedom. I didn't know which was leading me. At the cabin, the air was crisp, the ocean not far away. We unloaded our bags. Laura lit a small fireplace. We sat on the couch, and I told her everything. About the postcard, the texts, the moment I realized the woman I loved was giving herself to another man. She listened with quiet understanding. No judgment, no pity. After a while, we found ourselves sharing more than words. The closeness that had been brewing for weeks spilled over. I tasted salt on her skin. Tears or ocean mist, I wasn't sure. For a moment, I felt alive again. But underneath it all, there was a pang of guilt, a voice saying, "This is wrong." And another voice responding, "You deserve this. Let it go." In the morning, we woke to gulls crying overhead and the soft roar of waves. Laura asked if I wanted to stay longer. I found I couldn't. As much as I hated Seattle, I needed closure or retribution or something. I told her I'd drop her off, but that I was leaving for good. I didn't want to live in that house anymore. She nodded, said she understood. She offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I had to do alone. When we pulled up to my home, Marissa was by the window, exactly as I'd left her. Our eyes locked through the glass. She watched me open the trunk, watched Laura step out, her jacket buttoned to her chin. She saw the suitcase I carried, the same one I used for business trips. That moment felt like an echo of the show we'd watched. The 9th episode, the wife crawling into bed with the boss. Only now, I was the one stepping away. She pressed her palm to the window as we made our way to Laura's car. I can't describe the expression on her face, somewhere between devastation and resignation, or maybe relief. Maybe she thought I was doing all this just to hurt her, that it was my revenge, that I'd come back once she'd learned her lesson. Part of me wished it were that simple, but the truth was, I was done. I turned my back on that house, on Toby, on the life I'd poured years into. We drove off in silence. Laura tried to catch my gaze, but I stared at the road. A mile later, we stopped at an intersection. She asked, "Are you sure?" I answered with a nod. My mind was a storm. Images of Marissa, glimpses of Daniel's smirk, the memory of that locked office door, the beep of her phone at night. I needed to erase it all. I ended up renting a short-term place in a different part of the city, a small apartment with just the basics. No pictures on the walls, no memories lying around in old boxes. I stayed there for weeks, ignoring calls, letting everything fade into background noise. Marissa called once, left a voicemail. "Robert, please. I know everything's broken, but you can't just..." She stopped. "I love you. I'm sorry." That was the end of the message. I never called back. Laura visited me occasionally. We'd talk, but I sensed she knew there was a distance I couldn't close. She was a comfort in the midst of my unraveling, yet I couldn't be fully present. My mind was stuck on the image of my wife at the window. Part of me wished she had run after the car, demanded I stop, forced me to face her, but she just stood there, letting me slip away into the shadows. Or maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe that's just who she'd always been. Days became weeks, then a couple of months. By then, I felt numb. The anger simmered, but the rawness was gone. One late night, a friend texted me, "Man, you gotta see the last episode of that show you guys were watching. The main character's wife tries to come clean, but it's too late. The husband just walks off, never looks back." I stared at the phone, a bitter laugh escaping me. Life imitates art, or maybe I was living in the aftermath of that 9th episode. It was around that time that I filed the divorce papers. I didn't want to talk to Marissa face to face, not yet, so I sent them through a lawyer. She responded with quiet acceptance, so I heard. No fight, no appeals. She just gave her statement, and that was it. Maybe a part of her felt guilt too deep to protest. Or maybe she'd already retreated into her own fortress of denial. Then came the day we were supposed to finalize. A part of me expected her not to show up. But she did, looking pale, hair pulled back, wearing a simple dark dress. We sat across a wide table in a conference room. Our lawyers did most of the talking. She glanced at me once. Our eyes met. For a brief second, I glimpsed the woman I fell in love with years ago. Vulnerable, searching. But I turned away. The papers were signed. She nodded stiffly when it was done, her eyes brimming with tears that refused to fall. I left without a word. That night, alone in the apartment, I realized the magnitude of what I'd lost. And what I'd gained. My heart pounded in my chest, a final protest. I thought about calling her. Maybe telling her that I still loved her, even now, in some twisted corner of my soul. But I crushed that impulse. Pride, sorrow, or simple self-preservation, maybe all three. Instead, I sank onto the bed, closed my eyes, and exhaled. It felt like letting go of a heavy weight, but also like losing a piece of my soul. Laura asked me later, "Do you think you'll ever talk to her again?" I shrugged. Truth is, I didn't know. The next week, I quit my marketing job too. My boss offered me a sabbatical, a pay cut, anything to keep me. I thanked him and left. I had some savings, enough to drift for a while, enough to vanish into my own personal series, where the dead remain silent and the living guess how they died. I started driving south, through Oregon, into California. No destination in mind, just needed the open road. The highway at night became my therapy. I listened to old rock stations, windows halfway down, letting the cool air sting my cheeks. I pictured Marissa at the moment she first let Daniel touch her, and the cold fury in me twisted into a dull ache. I wanted to hate her. But the truth was, I still cared. That's the worst part. A few days into my aimless journey, I pulled over at a scenic overlook, stared out at the Pacific. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hear you left. Good luck, man. D. Daniel." The nerve. My jaw clenched so tight, I tasted blood where I bit my cheek. I wanted to fling the phone into the ocean, but my hand just trembled. In that moment, I realized that no matter how far I drove, the memory of him and her would chase me. I breathed, forced a calm I didn't feel, typed back 2 words. "Go to hell." Then I blocked the number. It was petty, but it felt satisfying for a second. After that, I kept driving farther into the quiet. Every once in a while, I'd think of Toby, my dog, wondering if Marissa was taking care of him, if he was pacing the hallway looking for me. I'd think of how she used to smile at me when we first moved to Seattle, how she believed in me. And then I'd see them in that office, the hush, the sunlight through the blinds. My mind was a battlefield, each memory colliding, no victor in sight. Weeks turned into months. I lived in motels, cooked cheap meals. Sometimes I'd chat with strangers in diners, use a fake name. One night, I found myself in a small bar outside Sacramento, sipping a beer, reflecting on the man I used to be. I was stable, responsible, devoted. Did that man exist anymore? Or had I killed him the moment I walked away? Finally, the day came when I realized the road wasn't healing me. I might outrun my old life, but I couldn't outrun my own head. So, I turned around and headed back to Seattle, not to reclaim the past, but to face it. I reached out to Laura, who texted me occasionally, checking in. She sounded surprised but genuinely happy to hear my voice. She mentioned a new job she'd taken, an opening that might fit my skill set. "Just come back, figure it out," she said. "If nothing else, we'll talk." When I arrived, Laura and I met for coffee again at that same place, so reminiscent of the start of our bond. She told me about her life, how she tried to maintain contact with Marissa. But Marissa had retreated into her yoga world, rarely socializing. Laura paused, scanning my face. You know she still asks about you, right? I felt a pang in my gut. I'm not sure I want to know. She nodded, changed the subject. Eventually, we left the coffee shop, standing by her car. She touched my arm. Is this real for us? Or are we just two lonely people who needed each other for a moment? I closed my eyes. I don't know, Laura. It was real enough when I needed it. That's all I can say right now. She accepted that, with a quiet sadness in her eyes. Time passed. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, took the job Laura recommended, tried to piece together a new routine. Mornings were a blur of phone calls and marketing data. Evenings, I'd sometimes have dinner with Laura. But something in me felt off. I realized that I'd never confronted Marissa directly. The divorce was a formality, but the pain was still raw. Maybe we needed that final conversation. The scream or the silent acceptance. Something to put the ghost to rest. So I texted her, "Hey, can we talk?" She responded with a single word, "Yes." We arranged to meet at a neutral spot, a small cafe near the old neighborhood. When I arrived, she was already there, seated at a table, sipping tea. She looked thinner, more fragile. My heart lurched despite everything. I sat across from her. For a long moment, we just studied each other. She was the first to speak. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "I never meant to." She stopped, tears brimming. "I don't know what I meant. I just lost myself." Her apology was like a wave of conflicting emotions washing over me. I wanted to lash out, to remind her of the nights I lay awake, imagining her in his arms. But I also remembered the warmth of her smile in our early years. So I just said, "It's done." She swallowed, nodded. "I know, but I owe you an explanation." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." She wrapped her hands around her teacup, stared at the table. Then, in halting words, she explained how she felt unseen, how the routine of our life had lulled her into a sense of numbness. Meeting Daniel again reawakened something, an old spark from when they'd first known each other. "It was never about you not being good enough," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You were always good, solid, dependable. I just needed something else, and I didn't know how to tell you." I listened in silence, my anger thawing into a dull ache. Some part of me appreciated her honesty. Another part resented her for not coming to me before stepping into betrayal. Still, the final bullet had been fired long ago. "No turning back," she asked quietly. "Do you hate me?" I exhaled, stared into her eyes. "No," I said. "I wish I could. It'd be easier. But no." We talked a bit longer, each revealing the private storms we'd weathered in those silent months. By the end, we were spent, like soldiers who'd fought a war too long. I stood to leave. She looked up at me with a trembling lip. "I want you to be happy, Robert, even if it's not with me." For a moment, I almost touched her shoulder, but I couldn't. I walked out, the door closing behind me with a gentle chime. I didn't see her again. Last I heard, she'd taken Toby and moved to a different neighborhood. The country club rumor mill said Daniel had transferred to another branch in a different state. Good riddance. My guess is that their flame didn't last. Or maybe it did. I don't care anymore. As for me, I tried to open up to Laura, but some part of me stayed locked in that memory. Eventually, she and I had a talk of our own. We decided we were better off giving each other space. She wanted a partnership built on trust and hope, not shared resentment. I agreed. We parted as friends, maybe with some lingering affection. But we parted, all the same. And so, I stand here now, telling you this story, like a confession to a stranger, wondering if any of it means I'm a better man or a broken one. Maybe both. The last time I spoke with Marissa, truly spoke, was at that cafe. After that, she's an echo in my mind. She's not my ex-wife. She's my unfinished ending. Sometimes I watch the final episodes of that show she used to love, the one with the cheating wife and the boss. I see how the husband disappears, how the living keep speculating about the dead. And I get it now. The real tragedy is never the betrayal alone. It's the emptiness that follows, the unanswered questions. People wander around like restless ghosts, trying to piece together how a love that once felt so certain could unravel. I guess that's where I am now, a bit of a ghost, but still driving forward, still waking up each morning, still making coffee, still remembering Toby's bark, hoping that, one day, I'll find a sense of peace in my own life. Or maybe I already have. That's my story. And if you're wondering how it ends, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we carry these scars forever, each of us changed, each of us forced to grow from the pain. I was good. She was lost. He was just a trigger. That's all there is. That's all that ever was. So here I am, silent. And if you asked me how I feel about her, even after all of it, I'd say, I love her. That's the deepest cut of all. Because love doesn't vanish with a signature on legal documents or the slamming of a door. Sometimes it lingers, unspoken, unresolved, like a question mark at the end of a sentence you can't finish. Or maybe it's a quiet period that no one ever reads aloud. That's it. I'm gone. If she wonders how I died in her story, let her guess. Some things are better left unsaid. Let the living keep on living, and the dead keep their silence. I was never her ex. I'm her unresolved final. And that's how the story ends.